The sports you love, the teams you can't live without.
Get a sense of urgency!
This is Jake Scott and Ben Anderson on 97.5 The KSL Sports Zone.
Jake and Ben, 97.5 The KSL Sports Zone. Ben on vacation today. He'll be back coming up next week, but the Western Conference Finals roll on. Let's get out to the Zone phone. Joining us now and makes the magic happen on the Locked On Timberwolves podcast. And he joins us now, Ben Beecken on Jake and Ben. How's it going, Ben? You're replacing basically another Ben.
I'll take that. Yeah, happy to be on.
So I am curious for your honest opinion about working for David Locke. Feel free to really, air it out.
I didn't know this was going to be didn't know this would just be a setup here. Yeah.
No,
David's outstanding. David's outstanding. Locked On Jazz is it's amazing how awesome Locked On Jazz does in the off season. Even the Jazz haven't played in a month and just cruises right along.
I host the pre-game, halftime, and post-game show for the Jazz broadcast. So
sure,
I work really closely with David. So I was talking about this earlier in the show. Obviously, we're really familiar with the strengths and weaknesses of one Rudy Gobert. And in game one, he was basically neutralized, only played 21 minutes, did not play well. And I threw out the scorching hot take that I really do believe that the difference in this series may be Chris Finch finding a way to help Rudy be effective. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, that's an interesting idea. I mean, part of him, I think he played 21 minutes in game one, and part of that was foul trouble. He picked up 2 fouls in the first basically minute and a half of the game, so that was part of it. And then in the third quarter, both Isaiah Hartenstein and Chet Holmgren picked up their fourth foul each. And so the Thunder by necessity went small, and so then Finch matched them going small, which in hindsight, I mean, to your point, I think that was probably a mistake, and I'm curious to see if that situation plays out. The Thunder are a very handsy team. They foul quite a bit. I'm sure their bigs will be in foul trouble at some point again if Finch decides to stay big, because it's probably not a winning strategy to go small with OKC with just how dominant and how young and athletic and long and switchable they are, especially on the perimeter. So, yeah, I tend to agree in the sense that Rudy's got to be on the floor a little bit more often. Now, throughout the first 2 rounds, Lakers series and the Warriors series, both of which the Wolves won in 5, Rudy did play less than he did in the regular season, but it was, again, more situational, more, hey, we need offense now, let's go smaller and have Naz Reid at the 5. It wasn't necessarily Rudy, being played off the floor, and somebody who follows the Jazz, that never really happened. It's kind of a fairy tale that was ever really a thing. It's more just being situational with it and being smart and using him in the right spots. And I think he needs to be a little bit more, he had some big moments late in that Warriors series when Golden State went small. And I think that's going to need to be the case against OKC as well.
I did not admittedly like or love the Karl Anthony Towns Julius Randle trade. I understand why I guess both teams did it, but I thought that Randle might be an awkward fit. Well, that seems to be wrong in these playoffs, certainly. So what has he done and Finch done to help him be effective?
Yeah, I mean, Randall's really gotten good at early in the season. It was clunky. It was a bit of a my turn, your turn, between Ant and Julius Randle, and Randle, it's not necessarily criticism on him as just, making the pieces fit. He's a former All-NBA, All-Star player, and so it takes a minute. And I think now late in the season, and even especially into the playoffs, because Randall's been even better in the playoffs than he was in the regular season. But he was out for the month of February with an injury, came back basically March 1, and he's been outstanding since then. And I think he's really started to lean into hey, if other teams are going to load up on Ant as much as they do, I'm going to get my chances. I don't need to try and force it. I'm going to be able to attack a mismatch. I'm going to be able to attack a defense that's in rotation because they're weighting the floor towards Anthony Edwards, and therefore I'm going to have a defense in rotation. I'm going to have a smaller guy on me, or, I'm not going to see doubles. And he's learned, hey, I could just attack this and, be the second side attacker and, put up points and get some offensive rebounds. And if teams do try and swarm me when I get into the paint, make the right pass. And he's always been a good playmaker, but I think that's been really great here recently. He stumbled a little bit in game one, the second half against the Thunder. He had 20 points in the first half. In the second half, OKC started to, as soon as he put his back to the basket, they bring a second guy and dig at the ball. And that was a bit of an issue. But as long as he's making quicker decisions, I think he's going to be a huge part of this series, because the Thunder, maybe not as much as some teams would blitz Ant, because the Thunder have personnel where they can play him a little bit more straight up, closer to straight up, and just maybe play the gaps with some of their length. He's going to have opportunities, Randall will, because of just how much attention Anthony Edwards draws. And I think he's now realized, look, I'm going to have some great opportunities to get mine in the flow of the offense simply because of the attention that Ant draws.
So Ant is he's a really great soundbite, right? He expresses himself in post games, and I love it. And his comments after game one about moving off the ball to get more shots, I thought was extremely insightful. And so I want to ask kind of a broad question, take it where you want to go, but what's he like? What is he like in the locker room or with his teammates or leadership style or really whatever way you want to go?
I mean, natural born leader is the best way to describe it. I mean, guys gravitate to him. The veterans that they brought in that weren't, like Mike Conley and Rudy Gobert were acquired later. You're very familiar with them. And they weren't on the team when Ant was a rookie, and they came in and, everybody embraces Ant. Like, you've never heard anybody outside the locker room or anybody that has, you can see guys like Austin Rivers has a podcast now of his own, and he was a teammate with Ant for a season, and he has nothing but good things to say about Anthony Edwards. Like, these guys who have played with him and have been in the locker room with him really understand that Ant has that kind of emotional intelligence that a lot of people don't have, much less somebody of his age and his experience level in the NBA. I mean, I guess now he is in year 5, but he's still 23. So he understands that different guys are motivated in different ways, almost like a really good head coach would. And understanding that, like, hey, Rudy Gobert is motivated in one way, and Jaden McDaniels is motivated in a different way. Actually, those guys are probably pretty similar in how they're motivated, but like different guys want different things, and different guys respond well to being called out or respond maybe better to being praised in the media. And Ant will go out of his way to do that. And guys genuinely appreciate it because Anthony Edwards means it. And he just has this, he knows what to say and when. And sometimes, just at least specific to his teammates, sometimes he, puts his foot in his mouth in the media just more broadly and in his off the court life, certainly. But I think in the locker room and from what he says post game at the podium, like, he knows what to say and when, and he knows which guys respond best to things. And that's just kind of a natural born type quality that he has.
I'll tell you what I love about him on the floor is that he's a two-way guy. And I think you can say the same thing about Shea for Oklahoma City. Maybe he's not quite the defender that Ant is, but very solid on that side of the ball. Do you think maybe this is the direction that we're going to see superstars go? I mean, guys that can really impact the game in every way?
I mean, I think so. I think the way that the game is played now with, obviously the number of possessions there are, the speed, the pace at which the game is played, I think it's even that much more important. I mean, you look at kind of the outgoing generation of stars, there aren't that many, to your point. I mean, like Jimmy Butler is a good example, probably the best example of a true two-way guy, at least in the backcourt. And so, yeah, I mean, I think you look at some of the best players in the league, Giannis is a really good example, and he, I guess, kind of bridges the gap. He's kind of in between the Jimmy Butler, that era, and Ant and SGA's era. SGA and Ant are both two-way guys. I mean, when healthy, Joel Embiid's a good example of that. Jokic isn't a great one-on-one defender, but he's a good team defender. He's an intelligent player, and he's not a detriment to the defense as some stars have been in the past. So I certainly think that's a possibility. I think Ant's actually a better on-ball defender than SGA. Obviously, OKC's team defense was historically great this year, and SGA was part of that. I think SGA is probably better off the ball as a team defender, knowing where to be and when. Edwards still struggles a little bit, staying locked in off the ball and not gambling and not falling asleep off the ball. But on the ball, Ant has all the tools to be all defense, and the Wolves just kind of pick their spots. When is it necessary to burn him out on the ball defensively because he's carrying so much of our offense? But in the moment, if he's locked in, like, we're going to see a game at some point in the series, probably more than one, where Ant is on SGA in crunch time. It's going to be a ton of fun. And I think Ant has some success going at SGA on the other end of the floor. So I'm looking forward to seeing that matchup between two young superstars who are to your point, both, legit two-way players.
Of the non-all-stars for the T-Wolves, talk about the role guys, who's got to have a good series for Minnesota if they're going to have a chance?
I think it's Jaden McDaniels. There's been a lot of talk about Naz Reid, and I did the crossover show with Rylan Stiles of Locked On Thunder the other day, and he was worried about Naz because he had some big games against OKC this year, and certainly he's going to have minutes at the 5, an opportunity to do that. Naz will, but Naz has been struggling a little bit lately. He hasn't been great since early in the Lakers series, really, and really struggled in Game 1. He was 1 of 11 shooting. I think Jaden McDaniels, he's a starter, first of all. He's going to be on the floor at the beginning of the game. He's going to be the primary defender on SGA, but he's also the guy that the Thunder are going to leave, especially if Rudy's not on the floor and they're playing a smaller lineup. Jaden McDaniels is the one guy who teams are still willing to kind of gamble that, hey, he can't beat us. And he has beaten both the Lakers and the Warriors. He's had outstanding games. He's averaging like 15 or 16 points per game in the playoffs. And he is legit, and he was all defensive second team last year, but the offensive game is starting to come around, and he's starting to understand, when do I let it fly from three, where he's a slightly below average 3-point shooter? When do I pump fake and drive? And when do I look to pass on the drive? And he's really started to figure that out. He has the length and athleticism to score over almost anybody. And I think if he is able to do what he did basically throughout the first two rounds, the Wolves have a real shot in this series. And he scored the first 5 points of the game for Minnesota actually in game one, and then only had one bucket the rest of the night. So he's going to be important to what the Wolves do if they're going to win game two and have a shot to win the series.
What's your take on the Thunder? They were so dominant in the regular season, and they've seen some, I know game one went the way it did, but they've seen a little more vulnerable than I thought they would be.
Yeah, I mean, the way that they play, it does seem a little bit – it is more conducive to the regular season. Obviously, they won 68 games, so they're incredible no matter what. And maybe if they put the pedal to the metal, they're a 70-plus win team. They're still obviously, especially with the 1-0 lead, the favorite for the series, and they're still the best team in the NBA. They were all season. But I think where they're vulnerable still is they don't have much offense outside of SGA, at least not consistently. Like, obviously Jalen Williams is great and an all-star, but he's not a top 20 player in this league. And most teams you see win a title have a couple of top 20, top 25 guys. And, the Thunder don't necessarily have that. So there's some nights where teams sell out to really stop SGA and somebody else has to score. And that's, I think, the Wolves' path. I mean, Minnesota won the fourth and final regular season matchup against OKC. They were down 24 points in the fourth quarter. And they took Ant tweaked something. They took him off the floor and were almost going to mail it in. And then they said, look, let's just sell out and let's break glass in case of emergency and sell out on SGA and legit play 3-on-4 everywhere else on the floor. And OKC could not hit a shot. They missed like their next 14 threes. The Wolves actually came back and won that game in overtime. Ant came back and made a cameo in overtime, had a big game-saving block. But I don't think the Wolves are going to come out doing that in game two, I don't think. But that is, if they get down double digits in game two, Minnesota is going to try that because it's obviously dicey. Like, if any of these guys are decent from three or at least not terrible in any given game, you're in trouble playing 3-on-4 against an NBA team. But that is the sort of weakness that Minnesota probably wins at least one game in this series because the role players can't hit another shot for OKC. There's not a consistent – they don't have a Julius Randle, to also carry some of that offense, and they don't have enough consistent three-point shooters to necessarily make you feel good about that. That said, they're incredible and a historically great defense and one of the very best point differentials, net ratings in NBA history. So they've got to still be the favorite to win. I mean, they are the favorite to win the title and for good reason.
What's the new ownership group like?
Yeah, I mean, they were the ones that influenced the Rudy Gobert trade a few years ago when they came on as minority owners, and they're forward-thinking, analytical. They brought in Tim Connolly aggressively, gave him a massive deal, lured him away from Denver after he built a team that then the next year won the NBA title. So they're going to do what it takes. They're going to spend money. The kind of next step on the docket is building a new arena, and obviously local media rights is a thing that is getting a lot of play. And so ultimately, like, now actually former New York Mayor Bloomberg is part of the ownership group as well. He's obviously got a lot of media experience. So, and Mark Laurie has and A-Rod actually have a huge background in real estate. So the arena and the media stuff is coming. But from an on-court product standpoint, I mean, they're willing to do what it takes. They're willing to stick their neck out and make a move like Tim Connolly influenced a trade like Rudy Gobert. At the time, they were minority owners, and they convinced Glenn Taylor, who the former majority owner, to sign off on that deal because they believed it was going to be big for the Wolves, and obviously it's worked out. So I think they're going to be a very fan-facing and forward-looking ownership group for sure.
Where do the Timberwolves fall in the kind of sports lexicon there in Minneapolis? And could they ever, with new ownership and maybe some new juice, could they ever climb that?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's funny. The Vikings NFL is often king. It's such a relatively short season, though, that I think the Timberwolves have to be next up. The Twins do very well when they're winning, as most teams in most markets do. But I think from in wintertime, they're indoors. They want to pay attention to something that gets them excited, and that's the Timberwolves. And it's got a little bit of a broader appeal. Minnesota is the state of hockey, but a little bit of a broader appeal than the Wild. So I think they've climbed the last couple of years. The Nas Reed cult hero stuff, the Nas Reed chants and tattoos and beach towels that are everywhere. Ant, obviously. So yes, I think the Wolves are going to continue to become more and more popular. Minnesota is kind of under the radar as far as the basketball state. I mean, there's tons of recruits every year that the University of Minnesota can't keep that are going other places. There's great high school basketball in Minnesota. And it really is more of a basketball state than I think a lot of people realize. And the Timberwolves, I mean, Kevin Garnett's heyday were just insanely popular and selling out virtually every regular season game. And I think we're pretty close to that again now. And, this team is already under Chris Finch the last 2 years has gone just as far as Kevin Garnett's teams ever did. So, I think the ownership group knows that. And that was part of the appeal is this market can do really well. And you layer in a new arena and a team that's been to the conference finals twice, and you're going to get a lot of local support.
Was it warm in Minneapolis yet?
On and off. It was actually chilly this week. It was like 40s and rainy. The Twins had a couple of rainouts, and but yeah, there's been some warm days. I mean, this is the time of year the national media will get to be there this weekend, and hopefully there's some good weather and people won't spend the whole time talking about how cold it is. Yeah,
my brother-in-law moved to Minneapolis a few years ago, and he said it doesn't get warm here until May.
Yep, that is true. It has definitely snowed on May 1st before. I remember walking to Twins games in snow, late April, early May. So yeah.
Around here, I got snowed on skiing on Cinco de Mayo last year. That was a kind of a shocker.
It's crazy.
Yeah. Hey, Ben, thank you very much. Pleasure to have you on the show. Great info. Keep up the good work.
Thank you. Appreciate you having me.
That is Ben Beecken. He is the host of Locked On Timberwolves. Game 2 of the Western Conference Finals tonight. Rudy and the T-Wolves will try and even up the series at 1 game apiece with the Thunder. I thought really good stuff. Yeah, and he kind of echoed with Jaden McDaniels something that Ben's talked about a lot. That he's a guy who has to perform for Minnesota, and he said the same thing about Jalen Williams for OKC, that they need that scoring on teams that aren't necessarily the greatest scoring teams in the league. Shea and Ant obviously aside, they need more help, and I thought that was interesting what he was talking about. With Jaden McDaniels. All right, we're going to have more coming up next. Jake and Ben. Ben on vacay. He will be back next week right here on 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
Hey, bro. You hear us every day with our crazy opinions.
Hey, what you doing?
Well, now it's time to hear from you.
Hey, great show.
Download the KSL Sports app and fire off your thoughts with the call-in tab on the bottom of your screen.
Your show is fantastic. It's the one that captivates me the most.
You can tell PK to stop singing.
Cheap bangs! Cheap bangs!
Let Jake and Ben know what you really think of the Jazz. Woo! Tell Hans and Scotty about your favorite barbecue spot or what color of tie JJ should be wearing on TV. The best entries will be played on the air. Download the KSL Sports app now and hit the call-in button to let your voice be heard.
I think you guys do an incredible job.
This is 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.